This is a comment that I got from my video, Atheists Why Care About Religion. An atheist commented, "I would love to not care about religion, but I have to. Admittedly, I also find it interesting. I've never understood faith-based thinking." And this person acknowledges that he could be wrong. He wants to know that he is wrong. And if he is wrong, he wants to know that so that he can change his mind. He wants to talk to intelligent people who disagree about religion. He seems to really care about the truth. That's why he wants to talk to people who disagree. However, it's hard to take the stuff seriously because he asks theists one piece of good evidence, specific enough and in detail that he can judge that their God is real and not imaginary. For Christians, try to accept one piece of good evidence that any of the supernatural stories in the Bible actually happened. But this person thinks that one is too much. He's heard nothing. Very few theists can present something distinguishable from wishful thinking backing up their religious beliefs. As far as he can tell, wishful thinking is all we got. So let me show a whole presentation slide deck that I personally have for the proof of the Bible then. And if you have any questions or objections to it, feel free to comment down below. So the proof of the Bible, that it is trustworthy, reliable, and authoritative. Why can the Bible be trusted? Because growing up, I was told and expected to believe that the Bible is true. But why is it so? I mean, if the Bible is not true, then I might as well discard Christianity. So I got a few comments over here. Trustworthiness. Is the Bible accurate or truthful? So, how do we know that the Bible stories are not made up? Now, warning before all this, no book can ever have all the details on something, like how a science book doesn't have every detail of the topic. Even those who specialize with like PhD don't know every single thing about the topic. And even until now, scientists fail to grasp everything there is to know. I don't think this is such a controversial take. Then, there can never be 100% proof that something happened, but there can be sufficient evidence to prove that an event likely happened. So, this is a quote by Tim Keller in the book he wrote on the reason for God. So back then, there were many bystanders, officials, and opponents alive that heard him teach, seen his actions, watched him die on the cross, and who have been especially ready to challenge any accounts that were fabricated. For a highly altered, fictionalized account of an event to take hold in the public imagination, it is necessary that the eyewitnesses all be long dead. They must be off the scene so they cannot contradict or debunk the falsehoods of the story. However, it's hard for these people to try to go against that because the Gospels were written far too soon for this to occur. The Gospels are the book of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These people who supported Jesus' resurrection had to prepare to be challenged by those who doubted him. The eyewitnesses had to be dead because they cannot debunk any of the lies of the events. And the Gospels were written right after Jesus' death and resurrection. Now, I'm going to teach you on something called biographical tests, which is a time interval between an event and the date of writing. So if I have text A that's written a few decades after an event, and text B that's written a few centuries after an event, you would prefer text A because it has a shorter time interval compared to something happening way later on. For example, I got over here, it is said that Jesus died, rose, and ascended around 33 AD. 98 AD is when the New Testament, pretty much all the books were written. And then in 632 AD, only then Quran was written. So following the biographical test, which one would you believe in more? Which one would you consider more trustworthy for a historical account? I would say it's the one closer to Jesus' death and resurrection, which is the New Testament in the Bible. So, the earliest writings in the New Testament were written within 15 years from the ascension of Christ. Look at Galatians, for example. The latest was within 65 years, all within the lifetimes of primary eyewitnesses. Now look at this table over here. So, you got some ancient texts like Aristotle. Look at how many years apart was the original and the copy. Now look at the New Testament, which is less than 100 years. Less than 100 years is a very good thing because eyewitnesses back then can help to verify that, oh yes, all these things that say did happen. There are some arguments that all these things are wishful thinking and made up, so I wish to go through it. The four Gospels have differences in details, so they think that it cannot be. It cannot be. However, the details of the main story are still the same, the idea that Jesus rose from the dead. And in fact, the differences in these minor details here and there support the argument against made-up stories. If you asked 4 witnesses about the same crime scene, you would expect the core story to be the same, and you wouldn't expect the secondary details to be exactly the same. In fact, if they are very similar, that is suspicious. Like, are they collaborating together to lie about it? Back then was a very sexist kind of world. Women's testimonies were not accepted in court, and yet they were considered the first witnesses of resurrection. So, if you want to come up with a made-up story about Jesus rising from the dead, why would you start by saying that it was women? Why would you try to undermine your whole story by saying that. If you want to make your made-up story to be as truthful as possible, you wouldn't say that. Women were not seen as trustworthy back then. That's why it was hard to speak up. In fact, the fact that they had the courage to speak up shows that they believed in something they saw, and they were willing to risk sharing something if it's so important. This brings me to the next part, which is apostle. The apostles of the church are depicted as petty and timid, arguing about who was the greatest, showing that they focus only on earthly power. Everyone deserted him and fled. So all these disciples deserted Jesus when he was arrested, showing fear in a very crucial moment. Basically, they were not on Jesus' side. So again, they are depicted as petty and timid. However, these followers of Jesus eventually came back after leaving him when he was crucified, when he died. And for some reason, these followers boldly proclaimed until most of them were killed for their beliefs. They did a whole 180 turn. Look at, for example, Stephen in Acts chapter 7. He boldly proclaims Jesus' resurrection, which led to him being stoned to death. Tacitus, Roman historian, says that Nero, the emperor back then, subjected the most refined tortures to those the common people called Christians. They boldly proclaimed until most of them were killed for their beliefs. But why be killed for your beliefs unless they had seen something that convicted them that is worth dying for this belief? Namely, the belief that Jesus rose from the dead. So why would they do that if it's made up? Obviously, you wouldn't continue to pursue this idea about Jesus' resurrection if you knew that it was made up. So how come you still go about it? Because they actually saw Jesus come back alive. Now, people hate the idea that, oh, only the Bible talks about this. Well, look at what Josephus talked about. This is a non-Christian source. He wrote about this in the Antiquities in 18.3.3. About this time, there lived Jesus, a wise man. So first of all, he already acknowledged that this person exists. Pilate had condemned Jesus to a cross, which is indeed true. So agree so far, Jesus died on the cross. After that, he appeared to them spending a third day restored to life. For the prophets of God had foretold these things and 1,000 other marvels about him. So weirdly, they also brought up the idea that seems like Jesus came back alive after 3 days. And then after that, go forth to all these Christians. So this holds some historical value as a non-Christian source, acknowledges that Jesus was a real figure that died and rose from the dead. Now, another common thing that people might argue is the copying and passing down the written word, like transmissions. Are the scriptures passed down accurately through time? Again, let's look at the biographical test. You got the number of handwritten copies, manuscripts. New Testament has about 5,800 Greek, 125 AD to the invention of printing in the 15th century. There might be variations in the New Testament manuscripts, which is a common argument that you might face, but we can be rest assured that the New Testament is 99.5% textually pure. These are all very insignificant kind of doctrine. And usually like, oh, do I put a punctuation here or not? Or whether it's plural or singular. So, you can be rest assured that all these copies are very much similar, same as each other, and the minor things are like inverted phrases and spelling errors. Again, let's look at this table over here. So if you look at the number of copies we have, Aristotle only has 49, but New Testament has about 5,600 of them. And you can see the consistency of the copies is 99.5%. We can be very much rest assured that all these New Testament documents are handed down very well. That's all I wish to go through for this video. If you still have many questions about it, feel free to ask me. But other than that, I'm going to leave you with this. So if you ask me whether the Bible is true or not, I'll say it is such a reliable document. And there's no 100% proof for it, but we have so much evidence to show that it is likely. Feel free to ask me questions if you still have. But other than that, I hope y'all are more rest assured about what the Bible has and continue grabbing onto the faith, trying to find more answers to whatever questions you have as you are on the go for Jesus.